Dr. Farrell, you were telling me that a recent research article from 2024 shows that 71,000 out of 215,000 participants will experience burnout.
Correct. We're looking at a society that has a third of it, one third, 33.3% that's burnt out. Well, we can only imagine what it's going to have on families, societies, communities, as well as their mental health. So burnout having the significant impact of depression, higher rates of anxiety. We're going to be looking at as well what is right now trending on TikTok. And we're going to discuss why burnout is really just more than this TikTok trend. The stats are real, Kyle. It's a serious global issue recognized by the World Health Organization in 2019. It affects, other stats say, up to 1 in 5 healthcare workers worldwide with symptoms such as emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced professional ability. I'm going to be breaking down the science behind burnout, its long-term effects on our mental and physical health, and we're going to explore practical ways to prevent it and manage it in your life.
Okay, all right. So stay tuned, everyone. We're going to dive deep into the science behind it, and we'll do a guided practice that Maria will take us through and some practical tips that you can do in your life. Welcome, Dr. Maria Farrell.
Thank you for having me, Kyle.
Yeah, you bet. It's a great honor because, well, first off, I'm super excited to have you here. And you are the very first honorary guest on Calm with Kyle in this new branch of video podcasts.
Feeling very special.
Yeah, and we get to, the goal of this is to interview experts. For those watching, a lot of viewers are in the States, but you are here located in Alberta, Canada, where you practice through Mission Hill Psychology.
Correct.
And I'm sure you'll talk a little bit more about that, but maybe I'll do a brief intro about you and then we'll kind of get rolling.
Go.
All right. So for everyone listening, Dr. Maria Farrell is a psychologist and she's a burnout consultant specializing in the prevention and treatment of burnout syndrome. She's developed the first known burnout treatment model for use in clinical settings and applies her expertise extensively throughout North America, so not just in Alberta, as a burnout consultant. And Dr. Farrell is passionate about helping individuals throughout North America beat burnout and thrive in both their professional and personal lives. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Farrell, as you probably already know through the Calm with Kyle channel, the kind of style of the content that I create is practical educational type videos for everyone that is tuning in. So if you're okay with it, I'd like to invite our viewers to start a little bit of a grounding exercise here together so we can all get maybe a little bit more centered, more present in our space, and then we can launch right into and receive everything that you're saying from a more rooted place.
Let's go, Kyle.
Okay. So I'm going to invite everybody here that's tuning in to get as comfortable as they can in their chair. And maybe you're in your chair, maybe in your bed, on your couch, wherever that might be. If you'd like to, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. That can help get more connected and deepened within the body. And I'm going to invite you to start by taking a few deeper breaths in through the nose. And your choice, out through the nose or out through the mouth. And in through the nose. And out through the mouth. Maybe just noticing if you're breathing a little longer through the exhale, releasing tension as you breathe. And on the inhale, perhaps adding in energy, excitement for what we're talking about today. Presence. And I'm going to invite you to drift your mind now for a moment to your back rooted against your chair, your bed, or your couch. Maybe noticing your feet on the ground if they're there. Noticing the chair supporting your bottom. Your feet are on the ground, maybe planting them a little more firm or digging your heels into the bed or couch. Rooting in your energy in this space. So that now we can tune fully into Dr. Correct. So opening your eyes if you had them closed. Now we're ready to dive in with Dr. Farrell.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm so excited to share.
Yeah. So Dr. Farrell, maybe we can start off with, what is burnout?
So there's so much confusion about like what it is and what it isn't, but the clearest definition I'm going to give and really have all of our viewers understand is that it is an occupational syndrome that results from chronic stress that has not lifted.
Not lifted. So it's like persistent, enduring.
Persistent and enduring, typically over months, chronic stress that compounds and there is no relief from it.
Yes, burnout. Something I've firsthand experienced.
Myself too. As a burnout researcher.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully that's encouraging for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So once we experience it, that's it, right? Like it's a one and done thing, right? It never comes back.
Oh, no. It's just, it's like chicken pox. Like you do your time, you have the chicken pox, and then it goes away. No.
No, burnout, if it's not managed, it can and generally does reoccur. So if there isn't a break, if you don't have that sufficient break from those chronic stressors that lead you into burnout, it's likely just going to continue and repeat over time.
Gotcha. So I'm sure we're going to get more into that and kind of everything underneath it. Where would you like to start, Dr. Farrell, with maybe really educating the audience and educating myself with this extremely important topic?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to start probably just from the top down. And, now that we understand it's an occupational syndrome, there's really 3 core symptoms that really embody what burnout is. And these 3 core symptoms have been researched actually over the past 50 years since burnout was brought to the attention of researchers in the 1970s. At the very core of burnout is emotional exhaustion.
Yeah, I know that feeling, but tell me more.
It comes from a complete, almost emotional wearing that you have really nothing left to give. And that feeling is persistent over. So it's, a complete drain of emotional resources that you don't get up into a 40% gas tank even.
Okay, I like that you mentioned gas tank. So it's kind of like you're running on fumes, so to speak, and you're still going, but nothing left to give.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the gas tank, the meter is about 10 kilometers to empty, or for our American viewers, 10 miles to empty.
Yeah,
and then you don't see any gas tanks or any gas fueling stations nearby, so you just have no choice but to keep going. And then you wonder, how far am I going to go until things completely shut off?
Wow. Okay. So you said that's one of the core pieces, and then
Core pieces.
Okay.
And we've got 2 others on the side, so 2 other core symptoms. That is cynicism. So when we look at cynicism, we're looking at persistent, cynical, negative attitudes and a substantial increase in negative emotion.
What would that look like? What would somebody see or recognize within themselves if this was showing up?
Having a short fuse would be one of them. Funny enough, increase in dark humor. I see a lot of dark humor. Specifically in a lot of professionals. And that's a bit of a clinical indicator for me. Because there's a lot more dark humor, and that's consistently growing and growing. And there's more negative emotion than positive, right? Irritability is also a big one there too, with the cynical attitude and having a very negative view on other people in life.
Interesting. Can I ask you a question about that?
Of course.
Yeah. When you say the dark humor, that makes a whole lot of sense. I also wonder, because a lot of my work is with, and perhaps a lot of our viewers are like first responders. And in the first responder field, whether we're talking about, fire, police, ambulance, veterans, military, there's a lot about the first responders, fish and wildlife, nurses, doctors in the ER,
Absolutely.
many more to name. So I apologize if I don't name everybody here, but one of the things that you often hear in those fields is the use of dark humor to survive, almost the use of dark humor to disconnect, kind of get through some of those situations. So how do you differentiate between, the dark humor that you're talking about with the cynicism level contributing to burnout versus maybe this adaptability, or are they the same thing?
They are different, and that's so great that you're making that that link there, because what we're looking at with that cynicism is that dark humor can be a way, especially across different occupations, of coping with chronic stress. Because when employees kind of engage in that back and forth dark humor, well, now we have more fusion and connection, which is actually, and we'll get to that later, is one of the antithesis of burnout.
Okay.
Yeah. But what I'm looking at is that if there's a substantial increase in dark humor that is outside of the norm and where the culture of the profession and job that you're in, I'm looking really for that outline.
Okay. That makes sense. So then to be mindful of, is it more of a connecting piece, or is it
It's connecting. Exactly. Yeah. And if the dark humor gets a bit too dark for the group members of that profession, that's an indicator.
And that would probably, the thought that comes to mind is what's too dark, but that's probably dependent on the profession. And
exactly. Yeah. And the context too, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. We probably won't go too deep into what
that's
too
okay.
Dark. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, so you got emotional exhaustion.
Yep. Cynicism, right? Cynicism, dark humor, which is really how it shows up in a lot of times. But we also have a decrease in professional abilities. And with decrease in professional abilities, whether it is factual or not, these professionals and these individuals have this feeling that they once were performing up here and they're way down here. That they're just not performing or doing the level of work that they used to do or used to be capable of doing. So there's a perception, and that can bring a lot of distress, because when you see and you look back at yourself a year prior, well, I was doing like A, B, C, D in the run of a shift with no issues. And now, doing task B is like you can barely get through it. And then you're questioning yourself and oftentimes shaming yourself.
So even then you're adding shame on top. That probably is another factor, it sounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that one sounds very disheartening. And the word that comes to mind is losing purpose in what you're doing. But maybe that's kind of a consequence of it. I'm not sure.
It is a consequence. It is a consequence of burnout, is that many people very much, they become completely disconnected with the larger purpose of their life. So even though burnout is an occupational syndrome, it makes them question everything.
Right. And could you speak for a moment, Dr. Farrell, around when you say occupational syndrome? Perhaps it's just my brain here, but sometimes I can kind of, jumble up some of these words and meanings. But could you talk more about it as an occupational syndrome?
Absolutely, yeah. So when we're looking at, and this is really grounded in the empirical research, that is a definition from the World Health Organization. So this syndrome, when we're looking at the precise definition, it occurs as a function of the workplace.
Okay.
If a workplace wasn't involved, now, and here's where things are up for debate a little bit, because I truly do believe that you can have full-blown burnout outside of the work context if you meet those three core criteria of the emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced accomplishment in your personal life.
Right.
Very, very important. Mom burnout. Right. That's big. That's big right now. Right. But just to anchor it back into the occupational syndrome, we're looking at so many occupational factors. We're looking at oftentimes high workload, right? So we're looking at specific workplace factors that really cause burnout in the workplace. It really does.
Yeah.
It's an occupational syndrome.
Yeah. And then does the World Health Organization differentiate between just it being occupational, and do they bring in definitions for, like, say, like mom's burnout, right? Like, because that's huge.
It's huge. Absolutely not. They don't. They just define it workplace context only. And that's actually been recent. That's actually recent. So that was actually included in 2019 in the definition in the ICD-11, which is their main book of medical conditions and diagnoses globally. That was only added in recently, considering, how long burnout's actually been around for.
Wow.
But yeah, definition scientifically, just within occupational context. But empirically, I know I see it in my practice. I see all of those core symptoms of burnout in non-work related contexts.
Holy cow. So there's some catching up to do.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think about it, there's probably a burnout without the definition of burnout for the entirety of humanity.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Sometimes my mind can pull us in these tracks. So
I love it.
Pull me back. And so we have the three pieces: cynicism, emotional exhaustion,
reduced accomplishment, professional accomplishment.
Reduced professional accomplishment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else do we need to know about these?
I think it's very important too that when we look at burnout, way more often than not, and I mean, I'm hard pressed to even, see one or two patients in my practice in the past that didn't have coexisting mental health issues, such as primarily generalized anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder, insomnia and sleep-related disorders, and trauma-related disorders. And that's supported by the research strongly, that they are inextricably linked.
And how, with them being linked, is it, the thought that comes to mind is the chicken or the egg?
I'm wondering that too. What came first? We don't really know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I think that especially since the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, what we do know is that both burnout rates across global sectors, as well as depression and anxiety, have both risen. And I think the mediating variable there is the effect of the additional chronic stress that makes both categories worse.
Wow. And then I also wonder, when you say that, like, how do cultural factors play in? Because we're talking about the pandemic, right? And, being Asian Canadian myself, there's been a lot of racism towards Asian people, a lot of racism towards a lot of marginalized communities. So thinking about, the increased stress and those kinds of communities, maybe we'll get to this a little bit later too. But how does that factor in here?
Well, and this is where I think the psychological research really needs to catch up. But what we do know so far is that the day-to-day overall stress burden of family expectations, cultural expectations, upholding those, but also upholding the expectations when you walk into your job, almost puts even more fuel to the fire. Because if we're looking at holding up certain cultural or family value standards, well, your overall stress load is going to be higher than somebody who may not have as significant non-work related stressors, cultural factors, family values, expectations, and cultural norms.
Gotcha. So plays in, just like, as you said, the interplay with depression, anxiety, and trauma, and then adding cultural factors. So we have to consider all of this when looking at burnout.
Completely. We look at burnout, we look at, okay, what's your overall stress burden? Which is really looking at all of those factors that are like, oh, that just adds to my plate, and feeling like, it's almost like a 1,000 little things that you feel like you're compelled to do or have to do, right? that contributes to, and you can think of it almost like a stress bucket, right? Where are you at there? And that can change and shift over time. But if that stress bucket is totally full, and you have, for example, microaggressions at work, microaggressions in the community, social exclusion, right? Or being part of a minority community, and the stress that those populations experience, well, that overall stress burden is going to be even higher.
So then my mind goes to, how do you diagnose this? Is it just identifying those factors that you talked about, or is there more to it?
Yeah. So we actually do not diagnose burnout because it's a syndrome and it's not in the DSM-5 TR, which is what we're using right now. What we can say is really, if we're looking at, this is a syndrome, we really look at, do they have to a reasonable and expectedly high extent, a high incidence of that emotional exhaustion, right? Do they check that box off? Do they check the box off of cynicism? Do they check that box off of reduced abilities? So if I'm looking at more of a clinical formulation, do you have all three? And have all those three been around for a long time? In a long time, I'm thinking 2-3+ months.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Maybe this is jumping ahead here. Stop me if I am. But then when you see that in your work and in your practice with clients, and you're saying, you're right, it's not in the DSM right now, how can labeling in this way be helpful for those you're seeing?
I think it's really important when they realize that they are experiencing burnout due to factors that are really a lot of times outside of their control. So that they're not looking at this burnout as a personal failure. And that's so much what I see in my practice, is that why can't I, right? So there's a lot of internalizing that goes on. Whether then, we kind of get them to look at things as, no, lay the facts out. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And when I can, help patients look at that objectively, they can actually see that a lot of these factors are not outside, that are outside their control. And that kind of almost gives them the breath of relief of, oh, it actually might not just be my own personal failure that got me.
Wow. It's almost like it would be weightlifting for a lot of people to hear that. Like, it's not personal.
I see burnout as a social problem. Social problem.
Can you speak more to that?
Absolutely. Well, if we look at our North American Western society, what does our society value about work? Right? The harder we work, the more respected we are by others in our family or community. There's a normalization, complete normalization of overwork.
Yes. Yeah.
And so much so is that there can be, some people can think of it almost as a badge of honor like a badge of honor to say, I work 60-hour shifts and I'm totally fine, right? 60 hours this week, no problem. I could do it. I'm tough.
I know that.
Me too. We both do.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a normalization of work culture. And I think that our society has lost maybe a while ago, in my opinion, bigger picture on life. Right. So at the end of the day, right, where is your time with yourself? Where is your time with those that you love?
Yeah.
And it becomes very unbalanced. And I think that that's also a major reason why we're seeing so much more mental health conditions in society now more than ever before.
Yeah. I think it was in your thesis, I was reading a portion of it where it said, and correct me on the stats here, but you were talking about how statistically 1/3 of people in North American culture, maybe specifically in Canadian culture, will experience burnout sometime in their life or are experiencing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually done by the Mental Health Research of Canada in 2021, where they surveyed about 5,300 participants in a large-scale national survey regarding burnout symptoms and workload. across various sectors in teaching, education, finance. And they found that of those 5,300 or so participants, up to 1/3 of them have or are currently experiencing clinically significant indicators of burnout.
Wow. And for the population of Canada, I mean, that's over 10 million people then we're talking about that's going to experience burnout. And for the States, I think the population is probably north of 300 million now, which is over 100 million people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we can, if we were to extrapolate the results and findings from that study on a larger scale, right? What would we find?
Wow.
What would we find?
Yeah. So, Dr. Farrell, can you then now tell us a little bit more? So you mentioned some of these signs and symptoms that we should be aware of, those key 3 factors with how it can play out and other things that have interplay with it. Tell us a little bit more around some things that we need to be mindful of with burnout.
Right. I think that's actually quite interesting from the research that I've completed, is that I was very curious as to how much of this is work and how much of this is what we're working with is personality, right? Over 10 years of working in, the mental health field, I've observed that there's specific personality traits that are more susceptible to burnout. So I was wondering, and I wanted to take a deep dive to see what do we have here between those core personality features as well as the work features. And these are kind of 2 really good areas of emerging research. And what we generally see, and I don't know if you're similar in your practice too, and what you see, Kyle, but hardworking, people pleasers, and those with high standards for themselves, as well as perfectionism, rampant in those who have burnout.
Where is that like a precursor then? Like if that's kind of a personality trait, that's going to increase the likelihood of someone experiencing burnout?
So yeah, they're predisposing personality factors, right? So if we're looking at, the role of these traits, then, if you already have a tendency to put other people above yourself, right, in terms of their needs, right, you're already cutting yourself short and looking after your emotional needs. If you have perfectionistic tendencies, that's going to show up in both home life and work life.
Right.
And if you have a very, consistent standard for yourself in terms of work, job, conduct, and behavior, well, if you have those traits and then you're put into an environment that gives you the message of you are not doing enough, they're going to try harder and harder and harder and harder until they completely crash.
Wow. So with that, do you also look at, is it a relevant factor of caregivers, parents, and those in the family? So if we're talking about, predisposed personality traits, how far back are we looking? Are we also looking at the family too?
We're absolutely looking at the family, and we're looking at beliefs that develop between the age of 0 to 5, 0 to 10.
Oh.
So if you are in a family system and there are transgenerational expectations that parents have of their children, and if these expectations seem to be relatively high, well, the child is going to want to appease the parent to ensure their emotional safety. So we're looking at childhood predisposing as well, nature-nurture debate, right? How much of it is environment and relationships, early caregiving? How much of it is inborn, right? But if we're looking at those predisposing factors that we see in children who are, the good girl, for example, right? Or the role of, the son that always has everything covered for the family, can always step in, right?
Right.
That typically carries right on into adulthood.
Wow. And I think about, a lot of what you're explaining is We could even call them traumatic experiences. For those that don't know in the audience, Marie and I are both experts in the EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, a therapy originally for PTSD developed by the late Dr. Francine Shapiro. And, a lot of our work is focusing on these like traumatic incidents, whether they're big ones or multiple little ones over time. So I guess my question with that is, how do we factor in these traumatic experiences, and how do we, like, if we start dealing with that, is that going to help with the personality stuff? Is that going to help with the burnout?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that if we look at, treatment for the early childhood experiences and the traumas that a lot of folks experiencing developmental traumas, the research is pretty clear that core personality traits tend to be stable over time.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, what can be learned is awareness of those traits and when they show up, and adjusting our behaviors so that, let's say if the perfectionism comes in, using strategies to mitigate or manage that. And this can sometimes be where the beauty of self-compassion can.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put a note on that because we're going to have to come to self-compassion again.
We'll circle back.
Yeah. When you say stable, though, so a little part of me gets inside, I get a bit fearful.
Yeah.
Like, what's set is set. And it comes to mind of the old adage of, you can't teach a old dog new tricks. But I also know that not to be true from clinical work and from personal work, but it still scares me a little bit when you mention that. So could you talk a little bit more about this stableness? Yeah,
absolutely. So, I think when we're looking at maybe from a bit of a neuropsychological approach too, 80% of a child's brain mass is developed and the neural network connections are between age 0 to 5, right? So a lot of times if we're looking at what is learned there during that time, of course, a very critical developmental period. However, if we learn a bit of a different relationship with, introspection, reflection, seeking therapy, then we can realize that these stable traits that we have, well, we can learn skills to, really not only mitigate them, but over time, change our responses to the environment and others that is way more adaptive. And that can, in a way, be almost a new normal for some people. Yeah. So personality trait at the core is, who I am, right? If you're empathic, you're not going to be non-empathic, right? If you're going to always value hard work, that's not something that's going to go away overnight, nor, question should it even.
Yeah. And could we also say the opposite too? If you're lacking in maybe empathy or compassion and the ability to have, motivated drive, that can also be, that's not going to go away, but that can be learned from what you're saying.
Absolutely.
To a degree, yeah.
It can be learned to a degree, for sure. And a lot of that comes with learning how to essentially put yourself first, learning what your needs are. And if done consistently over time, prioritizing yourself, it'll be very interesting to see, too, how you might change in relation to others.
Wow. So a whole bunch of growth can come.
Massive amount of growth.
I think I'm so relieved that you said however. The word however was so nice and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's hope. Okay.
There's hope. Absolutely.
Okay. So tell us more. You were talking about the personality traits. What else is involved here?
Yeah. So we're looking at the personality, but, we're looking at the factors of work, right? And a lot of research, I think, really started from Dr. Christina Maslach in the 70s and 80s when she went full-blown into investigating what are these occupational factors that take these really wonderfully hardworking, these stable personality traits, hardworking, right? Wanting very agreeable, wanting to really do a good job in really all domains of their life, these wonderful people, and how do they get to a state where they're so far from who they used to be? And that's work. So with work, we're looking at, number one, really is excessive workload. High workload that cannot reasonably be completed in a shift or in the run of a day.
Mm-hmm.
And these people really feel like they have to do more, work harder with less resources.
Mm. Is that going to be different for different people in terms of what that level looks like? Or is there like a researched average on that's kind of like human tolerance level, if you will?
Yeah. This is quite subjective. So everybody has their own level of stress coping, right? So what might be at my peak for me might be completely okay for you, right? So we all kind of have our own threshold of when is too much, too much.
Okay.
So what we're looking at here is the perception of this is too much for me. I cannot meet the demands of my job or my family life, if we're looking at, parental burnout, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask, so for our viewers, if this is something, this perception that they're experiencing, what kinds of things might they be aware of or mindful of, let's say in their thoughts or in their bodies, in their feelings that might show up that would signal to them this perception is there and true? And the reason I ask this is because sometimes, we can notice that, I'm taking on too much. Maybe that's part of the thought process, but can also second guess and question whether this is actually our experience.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about is, how are you feeling emotionally? Right? Overwhelm, persistent overwhelm. And there can be also on the emotional domain, helplessness. So there's a lot of helplessness and powerlessness that comes with the perception of this is too much for too long.
Okay. Gotcha. So it's okay for us to feel that sometimes, but when it lasts, persists, as you mentioned, that's when we're crossing over into this burnout area.
100%. When it doesn't go away. When you're feeling like nothing you do is enough, you're just getting through the motions of the day, but you're overwhelmed, and overwhelmed can also show up in total detachment too, right? And when that goes on for, I'd say, anywhere between, 1 to 3 months and onward, that's when we're looking at, okay, we're in burnout territory here.
Okay. So that could be a nice little, it's a gauge, I guess, so to speak, of, is it persisting for several months?
Precise.
Gotcha. And then probably several years is like red flags, like, okay.
Oh, yeah. This has been like SOS zone. In several years, it's like, I'm wondering, I'm like, how are you still alive?
Yeah.
Congratulations, but let's get you out of this mess.
Yes. Yeah. Fair. Okay.
And I think it's also good for, the viewers to take note of, if we're looking at a couple of weeks of overwhelm, a couple of weeks of this is too much, thoughts like, I can't handle this, right? This is too much for me. Why are people expecting this much of me, right? This is unfair, right? If they're having a lot of those kind of thoughts and that kind of powerlessness in the situation, whether it's a work situation, home, relationship, parenting, that's an early red flag that should absolutely be paid attention to. Because if they don't get that break, then that's likely to lead into burnout.
Gotcha. So tuning into your body to notice those in the first few weeks is
crucial.
Okay. How this is probably crossing over into a little bit of this occupational and treatment stuff, but maybe very quickly here, what can we do when we are aware of that in the first few weeks?
I think it's really important to set time to even allow yourself to have that check-in and that awareness. Quiet time away from everybody else in the household. Quiet time away from work. And specifically, quiet time away from your phone and other distractions.
Gotcha. So not doom scrolling.
Not doom scrolling. No doom scrolling, no bed rotting, no couch rotting, none of that.
Bed rotting. Okay. I don't think I've heard that one.
I kind of made it up. I think I saw
like
it somewhere. It's just like those who sit in bed for like 8 hours doom scrolling.
Okay, I like that. Dr. Farrell says, do not bed rot.
Do not bed rot. So taking 5 minutes, 5 minutes a day. How is your body feeling? And even, check in, do a body scan, notice any areas of tension. Asking yourself, how much am I suffering right now?
Suffering.
Suffering.
Not necessarily just pain, but suffering. Is that kind of like an intense level of, like, how would you...
Suffering, I'd say, is similar to that emotional experience of being in pain and being hurt. But suffering is almost, a lot of my clients experience it as like a whole body emotional response.
Okay.
That inner, I need help. And I'm in an incredible amount of pain, but nobody is seeing me. I feel alone, and I'm alone in myself.
So there's an added element of
Loneliness.
alone. So key, crucial things to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Are there more for us to pay attention to?
Yes, the physical changes. We'd want to look at muscle tension, increase in headaches, as well as dysfunction of the GI tract.
Okay. So stomach issues.
Belly issues. Yeah. We're bloated all the time. Maybe we have some new IBS, irritable bowel symptoms coming up. A lot of stomach issues are quite common as well. And in addition to that, just a general feeling of persistent fatigue. You're exhausted all the time, physically.
Gotcha.
Physical exhaustion.
Gotcha. And in your work, when you have clients noticing things like these physical symptoms, and I know in my work, I always recommend clients, when you're having physical symptoms, always check with your medical doctor first, is what I recommend, because we want to rule out if there's anything that's biological, organic, and then we can really determine if it's then, psychological, emotional, burnout related. Is that?
That is exactly how I work too, Kyle. Okay. Number one, see your family doctor. For those who don't have the privilege of having a family doctor, finding ways to connect them with a medical professional so that we can rule out any physiological causes of the GI symptoms, of muscle tension. Always making sure that we have a nice answer there before we start on some of that deeper inner relaxation work.
I really appreciate that you mentioned the privilege of having a family doctor, because they're few and far between, and it's hard to find a family doctor for a lot of people, depending on where you also live. I mean, we're fortunate here in Canada to have, different universal healthcare, so to speak. And you're right, probably in the States it's a different situation, right? Finding a family doctor, maybe you have more insight here, could be really challenging. So what are other things that people could do if they don't have access?
I think that reaching out to other members of the community, so finding out our social support network and asking around too, right? So whether it is safe people you can reach out to in your family system, extended family system, or even coworkers at work, just to check in. Hey, I've been without a GP for a while. Does anybody know of anyone who's accepting new patients, right? So really looking at the supports that are already in front of you and using their collective knowledge to try to connect with help, with services.
Gotcha. And I think there's a lot of online things nowadays too that they can connect to, perhaps doctors online, or perhaps nurses too could be relevant.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Nurses and nurse practitioners, for example, can be another great resource. And I mean, up here in Canada, we have TELUS Health, right? So we have TELUS Health, and patients can just book in online for a single appointment with a doctor. So using and finding those resources too, again, that can be quite tricky, but
right.
It's about connecting and really resource sharing and knowledge sharing with others.
Gotcha. So that's probably going to come into this connection maybe later on when we talk about how to work with burnout, I would imagine.
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah, completely.
So we got emotional, we got physical. What else do you want to tell us, Dr. Farrell, around what's key here?
I think what's important here to also note is some of the cognitive issues that come with burnout. If you're noticing, another key indicator is if you're noticing that you're lacking in focus and concentration, that is a direct result from chronic stress. Your focus, you're not just able to focus like you used to. You're mentally feeling disengaged, cognitively disengaged, because you can't concentrate or put any sort of, effort into the work that you're doing. So that also can lead into procrastination. Procrastinating on work, there is probably a reason why.
Interesting. And when I think about procrastination, I think about how much people shame themselves for procrastinating.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time. It is very much internalized, right? Of course, shame is that internalization, but procrastinating as well. So we have the negative thoughts and beliefs about self that we also have to look at challenging, right? That really manifests and get in the way of that cycle of procrastination.
Yeah.
So how do we break that procrastination cycle? Well, number one, self-compassion. Why are you procrastinating? There's probably a reason why. Right? Can you give yourself just a bit of a break here for a second while we look at the facts of what is going on?
So it almost gives people a little bit of some perhaps even relief. There was the word that comes to mind, that if we're looking at what's underneath the why behind procrastination, we can maybe understand what's feeding it, so to speak, rather than just kind of beating ourselves up that we're procrastinating and not getting something done. And you're saying that this is key to burnout.
Precisely.
So cognitive, is there more pieces to cognitive, or was that the main one that we need to focus on?
The last piece I think is important to note as well too, Kyle, is that there can be challenges with memory. And the challenges with memory come from a lack of consolidation of, short-term memory to long-term memory. So a lot of people here also have fear that I'm losing my mind, right? I'm getting early onset dementia, and I've seen that before. People seriously considering and wondering if they have early onset dementia.
Wow.
Instead of, because they can't remember things that they did yesterday, what they had for lunch this morning, what they did last week, who they saw. So there can be a lot of distress around memory issues and forgetfulness. But that is just our brain's way of saying, there's too much here. We cannot store any of this. And if we're not getting enough sleep, then we're not actually effectively pruning off the synapses from what happened during the day to consolidate into long-term memory effectively.
Yeah. So is that a nice summation of what's really happening neurobiologically with burnout?
Completely. And this is exactly why this ties right back into sleep issues and insomnia. That is almost all of the cases I have. They have sleep dysregulation.
Wow. Okay. So that's a really good indicator then for people to be aware of is how is your sleep?
How is your sleep? And to be honest with you, Kyle, that is the very first thing that I ask clients. How are you sleeping? So we're looking at quality and quantity of sleep.
Okay.
Quality of sleep. Do you feel like when you get up the next morning, you feel refreshed? Right? Quality, right? Do you feel like you're getting deep sleep?
And you're talking about the stages of sleep, getting into the deeper layers and levels of sleep and flowing through that?
Precisely. And what we're really looking at, the quality, is cycling through the 90-minute sleep cycle from stage 1, stage 4, non-REM and REM. So we really want to make sure that when people are sleeping, that they're actually getting those deeper stages of sleep, where a lot of those physiological changes happen that make you refreshed when you wake up and go through your day.
And you used the word earlier, consolidation, which I think is maybe one of the key pieces that's happening during these stages of sleep, if I am understanding you correctly. So that would be, my brain works in metaphors. It's kind of like saving a file on a computer, you're working on a Word document, and that's being held there. You said short-term memory, and then when we press save, that's the consolidation of it going into our long-term memory bank.
Precisely. Yeah. And that's our brain's way of essentially saying, you know what, that car that crossed me in front of, the drive that I saw today. Yeah, don't need that. That's fine, right? Prune that off. We don't need that. But those core things that happened that we need to remember for the future, that's when we click save on that Word document, and that's filed away.
Gotcha. And in situations of burnout, we're probably just leaving documents open, closing our computer, and they're not getting saved.
Exactly.
And that's not great.
Nope.
All the Word documents lost.
Yep. Lost, right? And then people, so many of the clients I have like catastrophize, right? I'm losing my mind. I'm like, no, you're just, burnt out and you're not sleeping. Your brain isn't able to do the basic restorative functions to get you back to where you used to be, right? It's just not able to. It's too stressed, too exhausted. And cortisol. Your cortisol doesn't drop. Your stress hormone doesn't drop the way it's supposed to at night. Stays high, and it keeps you in that light sleep.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, when we're looking at cortisol, what we're really looking at is that stress hormone and what is normal fluctuations throughout the day and abnormal.
Okay.
And the research in the past 5 years has shown that with burnout syndrome and chronic stress, the natural drop that comes, peaks of cortisol in the morning, drops throughout the day and bottoms out at night. No, that does not happen. The cortisol peaks and it stays.
Yikes. That sounds like it's going to have some extra taxation on your body. And that's the cortisol being the, fight or flight, connected to fight or flight, activation of the nervous system. So that's probably kind of like you did what my mind goes to is it's like you're doing a persistent workout without doing a workout and then not able to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah. So essentially your brain is, working out and being overtaxed the whole day. And then the next day is even worse because you don't have that regulation, that downgrading, that rest mode is simply just not able to be turned on because physiologically the cortisol doesn't drop.
Wow. Are you going to tell us what to do with that a little bit later?
Of course I am.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. Because if I burn out again, I need your tips.
I got you.
Okay. So Dr. Farrell, with all of these important aspects that play in and how it affects our bodies mentally, emotionally, physically, can you tell us more then about the interplay with work?
Completely. So we noted that high workload and lack of resources to do the job is one very significant factor, workplace issues, right? We're also looking at values mismatch.
Okay.
So values mismatch, personal values, what matters to me, completely in disalignment with the values of the workplace. And oftentimes I like to make a good distinction here between the stated values of work and the actual lived values in day-to-day practice.
Can you tell us more?
Yes. So if a workplace, if one of their core values is justice or equity, that's going to draw people in with those similar values to apply for that job, right? Because there's a perception of a value fit. What I stand for, what matters to me is what matters to this organization or the company that I work with.
Okay.
Lovely. Looks great. However, if those values are not actually shown in practice, and in practice, what I mean is practices and policies and interpersonal interactions, if those are not actually lived, there's going to be a feeling of, whoa, I did not sign up for this.
Yeah. So then there becomes that misalignment and probably like disillusionment, and that's where we can, I imagine, become jaded in what we're doing in our work.
Completely. And disconnected, right? And disconnect.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that's one big piece with work, and what else comes in?
We're also looking at perception of fairness. And perception of fairness, we're looking at, well, are these policies and practices the same for everybody at the organization, or is there any favoritism that's going on, right? So if you see another colleague of yours with the same expertise, same qualifications, yet there is an undertone of this person is better at the job or this new promotion than you are, without actually reasons why.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
That can be that little bits of unfairness that show up, right? Why am I the one with all this extra work too? And my colleague is leaving work at 3 p.m. Why am I the one stuck here?
Right.
Right? This is unfair. It should be an even distribution of workload.
Yeah.
That can come up as well as the glass ceiling.
Yes. Before we go to the glass ceiling, because that sounds very, very important that we should talk about. With what you're talking about with like the workloads and perceived fairness or what is fair, I see this a lot with, a lot of marginalized communities that are working in the workforce where doing the same or more, often more, is not being recognized, acknowledged, or rewarded, perhaps, let's say, in the same way as other colleagues that are not from a marginalized community. So I imagine that this is going to be a huge factor for a lot of individuals that contribute to increased burnout levels.
Completely. And this shows up particularly in those populations as well, is that they're asked and are almost feel compelled in a way to do more than their coworkers with less. And then on top of that, if they don't have, appropriate recognition for their efforts, if they're not seen, heard, or valued at work, well, now we're just adding on even one more token to that overall stress bucket.
Yeah. Wow. Would you be able to speak briefly on what individuals from marginalized communities could do in a situation like that? And maybe on the flip side, for those that are managers or that support people from different backgrounds and cultures, what could management do? Because you said seen, valued, or heard. So.
And this is actually really quite a tricky area too, because of the inherent barriers that members of these communities face. There's so much, I think, fear of speaking up for the negative repercussions that can come. Negative repercussions that can come particularly in speaking up, right? And there can be fears, and these fears can be based, and often are, completely based in reality, that they will be perceived in a worse way than maybe they already are by their colleague, their supervisor. So, with this one, what we're really looking at is, number one, connecting them with their spiritual and cultural supports so that they are more in alignment with areas in their life, people in their life that do make them feel seen and whole and supported and valued.
Okay. Kind of like that could be, for example, church, that could be affinity groups.
Completely. Yeah. And when we're looking at, management and leadership, this is where it is so, so, so crucial to have a workplace, particularly that is a psychologically safe workplace for all people to be in, where they're appropriately recognized, each one of them, that they're given even just like, hey, you've done such a great job on this project. I really appreciate that.
Gotcha.
And then following that up with actual tangible recognition, whether that is an increase in pay after a certain amount of time, whether that is more benefits, whether that is, recognition and awards, right? And to really make those individuals feel, especially by management, that they are incredibly valued and that they are an integral part of the team and team dynamics.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. And probably a hard thing to implement on both sides. Yeah. Okay. And then circling back, you said glass ceiling.
Yes. The glass ceiling is something that women, and particularly women from marginalized communities, face when they are advancing throughout their career, yet there are barriers that they continue to face time and time again, whether that is, I see quite often in these women, lack of promotion, right, to higher roles, where their male counterparts, who may, and often do, have less experience than them, elevate themselves to, right, and are hired into.
Right.
And we're also looking at the gender pay gap. Doing the same amount of work, pay difference between men and women. Same job, same role.
That's infuriating.
Very much so.
And that's, like you said, it's women so much and affects marginalized women as well. Like, I guess I take pause because it makes me quite angry that this is playing out. And I think it ties back to what you were saying maybe at the beginning of today, was that burnout is often a societal issue, which then ties into these differences in the workforce. Wow.
Yeah. Burnout is a social problem. And, I've mentioned it before and I will say it again. It is a dysfunction of society.
Now, I'd love for us to go that route, but it may pull us quite far. So I'm being
mindful. Leave another episode for that one.
Yeah,
we'll
exactly.
do another episode.
Yeah, noted. Okay, we're going to come back to that one.
Yeah.
That would be great to talk about. Okay, so is there more that we should know about the glass ceiling?
I think when it comes to the glass ceiling, it's important, very important to, for those in leadership and positions of power, to really, really analyze objectively their candidates and hire them in based upon their inherent skills, knowledge, abilities, and what they can actually bring to the team.
Right.
Right. Completely objectively. So there is minimal and minimized gender bias that happens in upper management.
That makes objective sense.
Yeah.
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 Sounds good on paper.
In practice, different story. Yeah.
So I mean, and maybe in a compassionate way, since like you're saying self-compassion is such an important piece in healing from burnout, we could maybe in a compassionate way say to those that are at the top level in managing others, to look at perhaps in a caring way, to look at their own biases and how they can really then meet what's on paper to create this fairness.
Completely. Absolutely. Yeah. Noting their own biases and just the awareness, right? The awareness and what they can do to put one step forward into creating more equitable workplaces. That's inclusive of really everybody in society.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much for speaking about that.
You're
that
welcome.
Point. It's really important, and hopefully for some people, it really gives the language to what they're experiencing. Right, like there's this glass ceiling, like it's so vivid.
Very, very much, very much. Just can't break.
Yeah, and there's lots of women that have though.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think that, wow, the knowledge and the strength that they have, unbelievable. I think that we'll never fully know what it's like for those women to actually break through that ceiling and to be in their careers where they are.
Other than obviously yourself, are there other amazing women that audience members can, tune into, like those that are maybe inspiration for yourself that have broken this?
Yes. I mean, first lady that comes to mind is Brene Brown. Brene Brown. She got up there. She went, in 2011 on that stage, and she was just her authentic self.
Wow.
She showed up as she was. She said what is on her mind. She did it, and I think that she's a key lady of inspiration for myself.
Brene Brown.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Dr. Farrell, what do we do about all this?
This has been the entire journey of my past 7 years. How do we treat this? And I have looked at every bit of research from, I think, about the 1990s all the way up till now. And what I figured from my research since doing my master's and my doctoral in this is that there's kind of two areas we need to approach this. We're going to, I think, talk first about an outside-in approach.
Okay.
So the outside is what our life looks like and the chaos that is surrounding us and our burnout. So essentially, where we need to start really is taking a reasonable step back. So we have a moment to look at our burnout situation and to realize what we're dealing with.
Okay.
Creating space in your life essentially to pause and to realize these are the areas in my life that are causing me the highest level of distress and are really fueling my own burnout.
That makes sense. When I think about when you're experiencing burnout, from when I personally experienced it, it was hard to move outside and see that. So how can those do that when we're in it so deep?
When we're in it, yeah. I think it comes down to, and there's a lot of economic barriers here that people face in even taking this step back, right? Whether they don't have sick pay, they've used up their vacation pay, if they don't have vacation pay, taking time off, and financially can't afford to take time off. Well, what we can look at is a time during the week to objectively analyze what is going on. And what we can do here is really even just starting out and even writing a list of everything in your life that is causing, one more token to go in that stress bucket, right? What are we working with here, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean having, you're taking time off work, because that's a luxury many people don't have.
Right.
But at least finding even half an hour of time to look at what it is that we're actually working with.
Okay. And we can do that simply just by maybe even just writing something down on our phone, on a piece of paper.
And then once we do that, we can look at how can we create space in time for us to allocate toward a journey forward of healing. So is there any one or two things that we have on our plate that we can reasonably take up and delegate to somebody else?
Makes sense. And then you mentioned people pleasing as a personality trait. How can we delegate when we have that operating strongly?
We have to call that out, and we actually have to believe within ourselves that we are worthy of help. Just like you believe everybody else in your circle is worthy of help. So in a way, it's almost a choice that you have to practice embodying, even if we feel deep down that we're not, because at this point with burnout, there aren't many options to put forward, and believing that you're worthy of the help, right? That does take time.
Yeah, that makes sense though. And like we talked about earlier, like you mentioned earlier, Dr. Farrell, like practicing anything we can increase our ability in it. So when we talked about, like empathy and stuff like that. So believing we're worth it to an extent can come with leaning into that over and over again.
Completely. Yeah. Leaning into how it even might feel if one day we believe we are worthy of help. And if we're even able to leverage that feeling, right? What can we do with that? Is there one step forward into asking a friend to babysit for 2 hours while you have a bath in silence? The small little moments we need to create in our life for a bit of space so that we're able to interrupt that chronic stress cycle that we get up.
Yeah. Oh, I like that specific example.
Yeah.
Like that makes a lot of sense because, like I'm thinking about, a lot of single moms with a lot of children at home and they're doing it all. They're working and then they're working again at home.
Yep.
And how to get a little bit of a break. So a friend, do you have other strategies around that?
Leaning on and identifying social supports. This is really part of that outside strategy, right? Who is in your corner that you feel comfortable enough asking for help, right? And being brave enough to ask them for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So social support, a consistent theme, I think, throughout this episode, again, so important here because we need, and the research has backed, perceived social support. If we've got that, we're already well ahead in our burnout journey. If we have that perception that I've got a community here that can help me get out of this thing.
Yeah. Could I make a suggestion? You let me know if this feels like appropriate based on your expertise, Dr. Farrell. For single moms or single dads or single parents that don't have that perceived sense, like maybe there are actually barriers for, not connection to family, not connection to friends. Could they, with the opportunity we have, even like, doing things online like this, could they connect with supports, whether it's through, let's say, chat groups, video games, whether it's through like-minded individuals, like coming on, like, I was going to say, well, I'll say Reddit. Reddit can be a good place, and it can
Reddit can be beautiful,
and not so beautiful. So finding community through there on like single parents going through burnout or something like that.
Completely. And you're absolutely right. And you bring up such an important point too, is that a lot of people don't have the luxury of a tight-knit family network or friendship network to lean on. So this is really, I think, one of the greatest benefits of, virtual, and everything that comes with, online forums and groups, is that they can foster meaningful relationships if you open up enough discussions. You can, from that point, connect a bit deeper with somebody who may be going through something similar, even if they're in a different part of the world.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. That increases like a sense of hope in me thinking about that. And maybe for others, that perceived perceived and real connection.
Absolutely. And Facebook groups can be another good one.
Yes.
So a lot of the patients that I have that are really disconnected, I get them to find a few Facebook groups that could be an option and could be a fit for them. And then kind of, introduce yourself, what you're looking for, what you hope to, achieve, companionship, connection, whether it's a local Facebook group with, let's just say, Toronto moms, right? Or, single dads group in New York State, for example, right?
Yes.
Anything in any demographic that you feel like you might belong or have, similar stages of life in can be, a wonderful resource.
That's really good to know. Okay. What else is involved with the outside, or is that the main point?
Yep. Two other things here too is boundaries and time management, right?
Okay.
So boundaries and time management, we're really looking at putting the stop, or at least reducing in ways that we reasonably can, to the noise that is going on around us.
Okay.
And if we're able to, for example, with our time management, cut down half an hour here, half an hour here throughout your day to that extra work task that you're compelled to do, and instead replace that time with something that's actually going to fill your cup up even 2%, right? How can we make time in terms of our 24-hour clock in the day where we can replace half an hour of doing with half an hour of being?
Oh, I like that. Doing versus being. Because maybe that answers the question around what do we do in that replacement, and how do we be then in that replacement? Because you mentioned earlier, not like doom scrolling.
Exactly, right? Because it's exactly, if we're practicing being and, we're couch rotting or bed rotting, like I love to use, right? And just like, existing in bed and we're over here and we're scrolling on our phone. Well, is it really adding in any sort of net benefit emotionally?
That makes sense.
So, how are we going to use that half an hour of time? Do we need to, FaceTime a friend who lives in Manitoba? Do we need to get in the bath? Do we need to go for a walk?
Yeah.
Do we need to jump on Calm with Kyle and listen to, the viewer's favorite, meditation, guided meditation?
Right.
Do they need to do a quick vagus nerve reset? Do they need to watch that episode?
Yeah. Makes sense. And can I offer, like, kind of, I guess you could call it a counterpoint, but sometimes I think a level of disconnection can be healthy. A level of. And honestly, I actually think that a level of disconnection is actually essential, right?
because we are so connected in to other people, the world, and social media that it's essential to disconnect from the noise around,
Right.
so that we can reconnect with ourselves.
Yeah. That makes sense. Would you say then it's appropriate then, so if someone is reallocating 30 minutes to, let's say, their self-care and self-compassion time, would they permit themselves 5 minutes of scrolling and then 25 minutes of what nourishes in being?
Completely. And I think that that's actually quite a reasonable goal too, right? If we can have what brings us down, almost like a segue into from the being mode, disconnect into really reconnecting mode with ourselves, then that can even actually make that even more effective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of bed rotting at a level that is like here.
Get in bed for 10 minutes, relax, doom scroll, but then do your self-care. Then do your mindfulness. Then tune into yourself.
I'll try that. I'll let you know how it goes.
Let me know.
Yeah. Okay. So you said time management and boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries, what we're really looking at here is interpersonal boundaries and time boundaries, which segues right back into time management, right? So interpersonal boundaries, right? Who is taking up in your life, right, too much of your time, energy, focus, and concentration, and is causing you an excess of negative emotion?
Gotcha.
Who are those people in your life that you need to communicate to assertively, right? I'm taking a step back from this conversation, this friendship, right? And then, creating space, because that's going to allow space to do some of that deeper inner work that we'll get to in a moment as well.
Okay. So I'm going to cut off my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister.
Everybody.
Everyone.
Get a new family. Get new friends. But those couple of key people, right? Communicate. Hey, I'm not able to be there for you right now. I will reconnect. I will circle back when I'm ready. And then, a softer way is to send a message of, hope, compassion, or a gentle reminder that they're still appreciated and a valuable member of your network.
Yeah. I appreciate how you put that, because finding language to set boundaries can be really hard.
Very difficult. Very challenging.
It's easier than just telling people to bugger off.
Completely.
Okay. So set boundaries, work on your own time management, helps you come from the outside in.
Exactly. And with the time management, these are boundaries as well too that you need to set for yourself, right? And this can be a time boundary that you only spend, 10 minutes doom scrolling, right? So it's almost like an agreement that you set with either other people of how much time you are willing and not willing to give them, right? As well as yourself.
That's a really good point, because oftentimes people think about boundaries as just between, one person and the other person, but it's also with ourselves.
It's with ourselves. And remember the reason to why we set this boundary with ourselves in the first place, right? It's to develop a deeper level of essentially trust and care, right? If we're here, right, and we don't have boundaries with ourselves of what we may logically think we should do, but if we're not actually applying them, well, we can set that boundary with ourselves because we know and we remember the reason why we set that boundary with ourselves in the first place.
That makes sense. Okay, so we're rethinking how we look at boundaries, which can help us
Completely.
outside.
Completely.
Is there anything else with the outside we need to know before we go to the inside, as you say?
Silencing the noise on the outside, and we're ready to jump into the inside.
Okay. Let's do it. Actually, before we jump into the inside, Dr. Farrell, I was wondering if you wanted to share with our viewers a little bit about, because you mentioned, this has been part of your research and work for the past 7 years, maybe a little bit about what you offer in terms of being able to support others through either clinical work or consultation in this kind of burnout world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really look at, these are we look at the factors that are causing the burnout, number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based upon that, treatment can and does always look different for everybody. But I do look into the factors of silencing the noise on the outside so that we can make space for that inner work and those deeper layers to unfold. So a lot of times in, for example, my private practice with my patients, we do those deeper layers, right? For my role as a consultant, we examine what are those key stress factors, and then we devise ways to reduce, mitigate them, and then evidence-based strategies that will fit for them in their lifestyle. And this device can give them a huge leg up, even within the first week or so.
Oh, wow. So
yeah.
Fast, quick change.
Fast, quick change, tangible, right?
Oh.
Tangible. Right? I'm all about giving people the skills that are going to fit their life.
Yes, yes. And for our audience, are you taking on new patients and clients?
I am taking on new patients throughout Alberta, and I am taking on consulting clients starting in 2 weeks from now through all of North America.
All of North America.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Only those are the boundaries. Only within North America.
Those are the boundaries within North America. You live inside North America, you can give me a shout.
You heard it from her, Dr. Farrell. Setting the boundaries that are important.
Set the boundaries. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And then, so inside.
Inside, we start, like we often do in trauma therapy, from the bottom all the way up. So what that looks like, and we mentioned this earlier, key number one, if your sleep is not regulated, if you're not able to get better sleep, then it's very hard to do the work, that long-term work, the deeper work, the cognitive and emotional work. That comes when we're in it, when we're in the burnout treatment mode.
Okay.
So getting better sleep is it really is like the foundation for burnout treatment, as well as keeping, addressing to any pre-existing or emerging medical conditions. That is essential, as well as diet and nutrition.
Okay.
Diet and nutrition, foundation. Diet, nutrition, sleep, and
that makes sense.
And viewers can start either one way or the other. But the most consistent evidence that we have for reducing chronic stress and improving mental and emotional coping resources is exercise and mindfulness.
Exercise and mindfulness. And can we break exercise down? Like, I imagine people can start really, really small.
Absolutely. Start small. Even the research shows even 10 minutes a day of either aerobic or anaerobic exercise. So either cardio or more of those muscle heavy weightlifting.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which one. 10 minutes consistently can drop that overall stress burden, that bucket, just a little bit, right? And if you're able to feel even 5% better from that, what else is incredible?
I love how you put that, because I think oftentimes we get into the trap of, I'm going to exercise, I'll do this 10 minutes, and then, afterwards, sure, it feels great, but it doesn't change everything, and then we get discouraged and don't go forward with it.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kyle. People have to have realistic expectations. Exercise will not fix your burnout. Exercise is intended to make you feel even 5% emotionally better. Have that expectation for yourself. It's not going to fix everything. It's not going to fix a lot, but it's that extra one step that we're building in above our sleep.
Yeah.
What if we're now 10% better?
Yeah.
Right? Feeling better. That's where change happens.
Yeah. Incrementally.
Incrementally.
Doesn't have to all come at once. That feels very settling. And it gives my procrastinator part of me. It's like, yay.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to do all the things at once.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Yeah. Set realistic expectations for yourself with exercise, as well as realistic expectations with mindfulness.
Tell us more about mindfulness.
Okay. So I'm dipping my toes deep into your world here, Kyle, because so many times I've had clients or patients say, mindfulness doesn't work for me. And I argue, and I think you just haven't found the right approach to learning how to be mindful. And that includes, what expectation do you have, right? Do you expect your thoughts to just go away and to suddenly be calm? Because that isn't realistic. And for myself included, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? Mindfulness is meant to bring you from here to a more grounded state. Right? And just keeping that in mind and being open to whatever the mindfulness practice offers you.
I like how you went from here to here, not from here to it's going to bring you over here.
Nope. I mean, we hope. I would love that for all the viewers, but is that realistic? No.
Yeah. This will be what you get in the first week with Dr. Farrell. It's here to here, and then over time she'll get you to here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Would you say with mindfulness, Dr. Farrell, that, because you said finding what works for you, and oftentimes mindfulness might get associated with, seeing someone meditate cross-legged. And I don't think that that's the only form of mindfulness.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you, right? Like the viewers are probably very familiar with in terms of, the content on Calm with Kyle that you provide, there are so many different types of mindfulness. But I think that a good objective to have in mind is, hey, we're going to look at this as a approach, and many approaches I can try out to either get my mind or my body down-regulated just 5%.
Gotcha. And could we combine the exercise with the mindfulness?
Absolutely. Mindful walking comes to mind.
Okay.
So if we're looking to go for a walk in the neighborhood, for example, or around your block, well, what is the intention here? The intention here isn't to burn calories. The intention here is to tune in and to be present with both yourself as well as the environment, while also maybe getting your blood flowing a little bit and being more present in your body and noticing, what comes up in your walk.
Oh, I like that. So stop and smell the flowers.
Exactly. Be present. Stop and smell the flowers and notice the details that are all around you.
Okay. So something tangible. Thank you for sharing. Do we have more for inside?
We do.
Okay.
What we're also looking at here is any activity that can increase a net positive emotion. Because with burnout, we are so empty. We are at that, that 10-kilometer, that 10-mile inner gas tank.
Yeah.
What can bring us up just a little bit to counteract those negative emotions and that pervasive feeling of exhaustion? So what can bring any activity, and this can be found through creativity, right? Starting or editing a task that brings you a sense of centeredness, groundedness, accomplishment, right? There's that accomplishment again, right? A sense of accomplishment, or engaging in any sort of interpersonal, discussions that make you feel better, right? Maybe a little bit more hope. So anything that can allow you to feel more contentment, maybe something that can allow you to spark a moment of joy, connection.
Yeah.
And so there is infinite ways where people can kind of increase their net positive emotion. But I'd love to share mine, to give viewers some ideas. Yeah? Okay.
They would love that.
So because I work from home, I love to get out for drives and to just drive around, the countryside. And one thing that I love that increases my net positive emotion is to go and to see horses in fields. And I have quite an equestrian background, so it almost, that connection with horses and animals, for me, brings so much joy to my day. So whatever way I can find that, whether it's going for a drive, seeing horses grazing, or going over to my friend's place and riding her horses for, an afternoon, that's one of the ways that I increase my positive emotions is through animals.
That's beautiful. So it doesn't have to always just come through people, it can come through animals.
And I recommend animals. I mean, I'm biased, but you've got your cats, you've got your dogs.
Yeah.
Tune into them. Spend time with them.
Yes, because oftentimes they can be even safer for some people, given circumstances.
Completely. Absolutely. They can be much, much, much safer, right? Emotionally, right? Because when we're, with our animals, they don't judge us. They are who they are, and they show up how they show up. And we're able to meet them there.
They're the best active listeners.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. I want a new dog now.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Farrell, so take us deeper in. What else can we do?
Well, if people and the viewers have any sort of ability to access mental health, counseling and therapy, the two most researched approaches specifically for burnout syndrome is cognitive behavioral therapy as well as acceptance and commitment.
CBT and ACT.
You got it.
Okay. Tell us about what do you think might be helpful for everyone to know about CBT and ACT?
Yeah. So CBT and ACT are both under the umbrella of cognitive, so mental approaches to dealing with our emotional experiences. So CBT looks at the interplay between our emotional experiences, our thoughts, and our behaviors, what we do from feeling our suffering, feeling distressed, the thoughts we have about ourselves that we've touched on about the procrastination, right? Those perfectionistic thoughts, right? And the beliefs we have about ourself and our worth, right? So CBT looks at uncovering that and modifying those thoughts to make us feel better and learning new adaptive or more helpful ways of interacting and treating ourselves, other people, and more adaptive responses to living.
Right. So what could somebody expect, say, if they go into counseling or therapy and their therapist is using these approaches? What is something they could expect?
For CBT, they can expect to have some tasks in between sessions to try out. And that can be through thought logs, through keeping a diary of thoughts, keeping an idea of what's going on emotionally, tracking that, and keeping a track on their behaviors. So what they do after they're feeling, an uncomfortable negative thought or emotion, how are they responding? And is that behavior in alignment with having them feel better long term? So you can expect some documentation, some practices, and some exercises as well too, to practice outside of session.
Okay.
And the same goes with ACT. Although not quite as much homework that's traditionally assigned in CBT, acceptance and commitment therapy looks at acceptance of, rather than CBT looks at modifying and changing, acceptance and commitment therapy looks at accepting the thoughts as they are, accepting the uncomfortable emotions as they are, and learning in a way to unhook ourselves from them so that we can meaningfully let them go.
It's like reducing the power of how much we're holding on to it.
Precisely. Tolerating and sitting in the negative emotion, noticing the thoughts, and then reducing the power it has over us by essentially holding space for our suffering and then allowing and accepting that suffering is a part of life. Suffering's a part of life that is shared by everybody in different ways.
Yeah. So there's connectedness even in there.
Absolutely.
Wow. And it sounds like mindfulness is really embedded in acceptance and commitment therapy.
Completely. Lots of mindfulness tricks and strategies.
So if we practice mindfulness, for those watching, practicing mindfulness now, build that skill a little bit.
Yeah.
If you go into therapy like this.
Bridge that in.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you think we need to know about CBT and ACT?
I think it's important to know that any sort of therapy that people seek is, it is going to take time, and to just be patient and know that, we didn't get to burnout overnight. Therapy does not change things overnight. It can allow us to have some beautiful insights, some sessions, but sometimes, patience and persistence, but mostly hope that things are going to get better. We just need to take that one step.
Yeah. I really appreciate you reaffirming that message over and over again. And I imagine there's a reason for that, because, we have to reaffirm that over and over again, just like taking these small steps over and over again, which adds to that percentage, 5%, 10%, and more.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And just allowing yourself that this takes time, and that if there's any sort of tiny wins along the way, make note of them, because those are important.
And you said tiny wins. Be anything small.
Can be anything small, such as you motivated yourself enough to go out with your best friend that you haven't seen in a month for coffee. Notice that.
Amazing. Okay, so if it feels good and you have, like you said, the access to looking into therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and in person, I imagine there's a lot of online too options now for people to add accessibility. Is that something you're seeing too then, Dr. Farrell?
Absolutely, yeah. There's some online platforms too that are available throughout US and Canada that are can be a lot more affordable than traditional therapy for people to access. So looking into what those resources are, and then, taking the next step forward, and, know that sometimes it may not always be a fit with one therapist, but that is totally normal, totally okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. And then a lot of times when you find somebody that you really jive with, who really gets you, that's when you're on the right track.
Gotcha. So keep trying, and if it doesn't work the first time, keep going. Right. Because not everybody works with me, not everybody works with you. And then those that might work well with you might not work well with me, and vice versa.
Absolutely. And we need to normalize too that it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 different therapists, if not more, to find the one that you feel the most safe and the most comfortable with, that you know and trust is going to meet you where you're at, and you have the same goal.
Kind of got to date your therapist a little bit.
100%.
In a professional way, obviously.
In a professional way, just serial date them.
Yeah.
You'll get what you need eventually.
Yeah. All right. So anything else with the inside?
With the inside, I think this is a good time for us to wind things down for our viewers. I'd love to share a practice, ending this episode today with one of my top favorite mindfulness practices that can be done at home with a candle. And if we're thinking about burnout, a lot of times people think of the flame that is being burned at both ends. Well, I like to turn this around a little bit and actually use that candle and the flame.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I've got a candle here. And if there's any listeners or viewers who have a candle nearby, wonderful. If not, you can just save maybe this portion of the episode for later and circle back to. One important skill for managing burnout is taking mindful moments throughout your day. Little pauses to reset your mind and to reconnect with the present. Today we're going to take one of those moments together, using a candle to guide us into calm. This is your time now. So if you have a moment, grab a candle. If you don't have a candle nearby, no problem.
You can just use mine right here on screen. Let's begin by sitting upright, really relaxing your shoulders, and letting your hands rest gently in your lap or wherever is comfortable for you. Close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And let's do that one more time. Breathe in. And out. When you are ready, you can open your eyes and focus on the candle. We're going to start just by lighting it. Simply bringing our attention to the flame. Notice the color. Does it seem more yellow or orange to you? And how does the color change and move? How does it move? Is it steady for you? Or is it moving side to side? Take a moment just to simply observe, letting your mind relax, focusing on the flame. Paying attention one more time back to our breath. And as you're watching the flame, begin to breathe even deeper through your nose, holding for a moment, and exhale slowly through your mouth. Imagining your breath moving in rhythm with a flame. And watching how the flame responds to your breath. And as you're noticing the movement of your breath and the flame, it's very normal to notice thoughts that pop up in your mind. And just imagine those thoughts coming and going. And allow them to drift away as you bring your focus back to the flame. No need to judge any thought at all. Give yourself permission to let them go. Allowing your focus to come back to the flame. Taking one more deep breath in. And out. Gently bring your hands together in front of you. Maybe holding them on the candle if you'd like. Or resting them on your heart if that feels good to you. Closing your eyes for a moment. Just noticing how you feel. Sending a message of love and kindness inward as we end our practice for today. And when you're ready, invite a moment of gratitude as you blow out the candle and take on the next step of your day. Thank you for joining me in this mindfulness practice today.
That was really soothing. Thank you for guiding us through that, Dr. Farrell. My body feels relaxed and calm and present. And it's nice to be guided through one for a change.
You're more than welcome.
Oh, that was lovely.
I learned my tricks from the best, Kyle.
I noticed that the flame, when you first lit it, was flickering quite a bit, and then it steadied, and it almost like it steadied my body at the same time.
I noticed that too. And I noticed too when I grounded myself even deeper there, and I deepened my breath, things shifted within me down about like 3 notches. And then I noticed there that perhaps because my breath was more regulated, the candle wasn't flickering quite as much.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I'm so happy to share and to be on here with you, Kyle. So happy to share and to really kind of spread the truth about burnout and what we know from science and how to use that to help people.
I'm so honored to have you here and for you spending a few hours here with me and everybody on the channel. Is there, before I share a little last tidbit about you, is there anything else that you want us to know?
Summit, I want you all to know that with burnout, there is absolutely a way out, even though there may seem like there is not, and there is no path forward. But just taking that one step and building upon that one step can bring you to a place of healing.
Thank you for sharing. And I want to let everybody know that if you want to get more information from Dr. Farrell, you can go to her new website at www.drfarrell.com. And you can also email Dr. Farrell. And correct me if I have this wrong, it's contact@drfarrell.com. Dr. Farrell, and that's spelled FARRELL.com. You can learn more about the science of burnout. You can message her if you want. If you're in Alberta, take it on as a patient, or in North America for information or consultation. And I'm sure she's maybe open to questions too, and how she can support others through burnout. Yeah.
Always open to dialogue back and forth. And Kyle, thank you so much for having me on your channel today. And I'm sure we'll be connecting very soon in the future.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Hull, for your time. You have a wonderful day.
You as well.
Take care.
Bye-bye.